There we are.
Great.
So we're live on LinkedIn right now. We're just a little bit ahead of our starting time, so we're gonna let people join in because they're in the middle of their busy days.
Hmm.
Again, thank you so much, Mary, for joining in and having this chat today. I know you're super busy,
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
as always. We always
As
are.
everyone is. Yep.
Yeah. And you're here in Toronto. Is that my?
No, I'm actually at my house today in Niagara. I live in Niagara.
Yep.
So yeah, I think they call them mega commuters. Mega commuter 'cause commuting to the office is about 90 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's March break, so home with two of my high schoolers.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. And one thing I observed is we both started in the industry just about the same time, which
Mm.
is sort of like well, we're going to date ourselves here, but
Yeah, I know.
the early 90s.
Yes, that's right.
And so we've seen the ups and downs of the industry in
Yeah.
all ways. So you started in agency, I started in agency as well.
Okay.
And we've sort of taken our career paths. And what I wanted to do is we're right at 11, so let's just jump right into it.
Sure.
You know, I look at this time that we've had in the industry. We've had the dot bomb of 2000 and whatever, and then 9/11, and then the
Yeah.
recession of 2008, and now we've had the pandemic.
Yeah.
Every time the industry bounces back in a different way.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious, like you've seen it, how is this time different when we bounce
Uh,
back?
yeah, definitely we bounced back, and I found that when the pandemic did kick in, and I have a fairly young staff, so for most of them, it was the first time they've experienced anything like this, and I leaned on muscle memory just came back in, going back to all of those instances that just kind of happened one after another, and we do bounce back. I mean, in the early stages, it's a little bit of instability. You don't have a crystal ball. You have to kind of throw away the idea that you know what's going to happen. Your long-term plans need to be adjusted. You need to be ready to pivot and to just take it day by day. Because if you try to project into the future too much, I mean, there's just so much disruption. And I think that's what this pandemic was, a little bit different than what those other events where they were big events, they happened, and then there was kind of a fallout that lingered on. This just seemed to be this up and down, up and down. We think we're through, we're back in. We think we're through, we're back in. So I think that's been the biggest difference, is that it's gone longer than I think anybody thought it would go, and it had that push-pull aspect to it, versus the financial crisis was just a big hit and then kind of downward, and then we went up. In this instance, it's kind of back and forth. So that's where I think the biggest difference is. And again, it just means that we adjust our objectives. I think everyone's become more nimble as a result of that. I think in some regards, if you're going to look for some good in it, just the advancements that happen in workplace culture and technology, even in e-commerce and the shopping options that are out there now for groceries, for example. So it did lead to a lot of advancements in a very, very short period of time that we probably thought would have taken years to happen, or maybe never have happened. So you look for the positive in those instances. There was something positive that you can learn coming out of all of those different events that happened in the past. So, yeah.
So what you describe as systemic change is
Yeah.
when it sort of goes into these events, people sort of withdraw for a second, they sort of circle the wagons, they reevaluate their spending on infrastructure and
Yeah.
technology, and then they watch for these new trends, like you mentioned, e-commerce, shopping, delivery, and all that stuff. So in terms of your business, like what sort of systemic change have you seen over the last sort of 2 years? And sort of how are you guys coming out of it differently and operating on the systemic change?
Well, certainly for out of home, those past events have always been a knock that we just kind of absorbed and move on. I would say the pandemic was a knockdown, where it literally knocked us flat on our back, because we've never had anything where people were told to stay home,
Yeah.
where they were told to actually not leave their homes. And that was early on in the pandemic. So it was something that we had never experienced before, nor had our clients, with regards to that. So that's the initial impact of the pandemic was just something that had never ever occurred out of home. But we saw that those lockdowns were fairly short lived. When you kind of when you kind of look back and you realize they were 8 weeks at a time, 6 weeks at a time. They weren't really for prolonged period of time. So we did see early on in that first year that momentum started to recover in terms of people going outside of their homes to do what they could do. And we certainly discovered that pent-up demand, that pent-up consumer demand, that people just wanted to spend and enjoy themselves and have as much leisure as they possibly can in light of all the the negativity that was basically in the news all the time, and that we were facing with. So as a medium, we recovered audiences very close to pre-COVID levels over the last 2 years. In some cases, we've actually 100% recovered in those regards. But early on, digital out of home, programmatic out of home, I think made some leapfrogs in terms of adoption by our clients and agencies, because it became that readily available on-off medium, and being on-off was so important in those early days where advertisers just didn't know how long to commit to, and they wanted to be out there, but they just needed that flexibility. And so, as an industry, I think we really leaned heavily on digital and programmatic in those early days. We as a company also recognized that there was some legacy policies that we had, such as 90-day cancellation, which goes way back, and that didn't make sense for the times anymore. So we adjusted that internally in terms of being more responsive to what happens in the marketplace. So definitely saw some, those are fundamental changes. I don't think cancellation policies had been changed for 30 years, really.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So that is a big systemic change, the ability
Hmm.
to have that agility in the market, and
That's right.
you can choose the various locations where different conditions exist. That's a big change for you guys.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
mean,
definitely.
and also, I mean, think of it this way: is today's, like it's going to be a nice sunny warm day. You got to think this is sort of like the turning point. People are going to go out for St. Patty's Day
Oh,
and
for
have a
sure.
beer and enjoy a bit of sunshine, and they're going to see a lot more advertising out there as they're out and about.
Yeah.
And of course, they're going to have their phones with them as
Yeah.
well, right? So, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the mobility data that you guys have been looking at, and how that works for you?
Well, mobility data really came into play. I think it might have been in 2018, where technology and data allowed us to geofence our static inventory and start to pull insights from the mobile devices that pass through the view shed. So we leaned heavily on that in those years of 2018, 19, to garner insights, location insights. But it's almost I kind of smile when I think back. We were getting them on a monthly basis. We thought a 30-day look back was great. It's all that we really truly needed for the industry, because it was so revolutionary. But the pandemic forced us within the first couple of weeks of the lockdown to speak to our partner, Palmrex, and say, we don't think a 30-day look back is going to be acceptable anymore. We need to know what's happening. And we know we can't get 24-hour look back, but
Yeah,
1 week. And they really worked hard in those early weeks of the pandemic. And we now have made week 1 week look backs the norm, and
yeah,
don't think that would have been forced or even broached. It was kind of industry accepted that we would have 1 month at the time. So we relied on that. And again, during the pandemic, when a lot of advertisers, their confidence was shaken, just in advertising in general, it's always the first line item to get cut in a marketing budget. But being able to use mobile data to show actions taken, so some type of ROI, whether it was ad exposed to the static inventory, and then you see that through foot traffic, retail FTA, foot traffic attribution, offline to online. We have been doing a lot of those type of studies over the course of the pandemic. And then in the past year, again, whether it's just coincidental or it's just timing, that technology and data now applies to moving out of home. So whether it's buses for us, streetcars, or for some others, it's taxi cabs. We're now able to garner those same location insights on ad exposed devices, because of the technology allows us to geofence the side of a bus, the back of a bus, the top of
hmm
a taxi.
hmm
So that again is now adding some ROI value back to clients who just need that extra layer of confidence in booking advertising and then booking at a home.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, geography is super important and super interesting. It's becoming, I think it's becoming something that's has been undervalued for the last 20 years. And as we sort of move into sort of deeper into understanding how geography and mobility data, location data, sort of movement data becomes that really, really valuable for advertisers and understanding things. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I mean, because you started your career on the agency side,
Hmm.
and so you made the big change a while back, and
Yeah.
been at Pattison quite a long time.
Yeah.
Does that give you sort of like a lot of insight into sort of like how the agencies are thinking about, the kinds of things that you've been doing?
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly did, especially early on when I made the switch coming out of a full service agency. So where creative was very much a part of our everyday lives in the agency. We weren't just a media department, we were integrated within the agency. And so coming over to the sales side, when you would hear that, for example, a buyer might require an RFP back in a really short period of time, and sometimes reps would gripe and like, "Oh, is that really true? Like, do they really need it same day?" I'm like, "They probably need it less than same day. Honestly, they do," because
Yeah.
I've been on that side where their timelines were so short. So I think it helped me just have a sense of understanding and empathy with what they were going through. Oftentimes, it may seem like they're asking for all kinds of crazy timelines and a certain amount of data, but for sure, that's because that's what they require in order to sell the media back or the media plan back to the client. So having that exposure really helped, and also just the importance of giving our clients more than perhaps sometimes they even ask for, because they need to craft that story to be persuasive back to their clients. So I found that it helped me not just be a deliver on the RFP and check off the boxes, but see what else we could put into
Mm,
there to help them. And that's why I'm just so excited about everything that's available now in terms of being able to supply our agencies with so much more robust data that hopefully makes their job easier in terms of
mm.
making recommendations for out of home.
Yeah, I mean, it always seemed to me that, when what you'd see with Out of Home is when the creative and the media really work closer
Yeah.
together, right? And it was back in the day when the agencies, as you said, were, what the agency I worked at was, you had media and you had creative, and they would sit down together to work out some of these things. And, you'd see some really interesting and exciting billboards
Yeah.
that are really memorable. They would use the sun, or they would use all sorts of sort of 3D
Hmm.
pieces, or the bus shelters that looked like jails and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was, like, I wonder, are we gonna get do you think we should get back to the place where, and this is my last question, we'll let
Yeah.
people
Sure.
go now, just, but, do you think that we should get back to a place where media and creative really work that much more closer together, or should we continue on with this sort of media as a sort of just a big data kind of exercise?
Oh, I would hope we get back to that synchronicity between creative and media working together for the big idea, or even if it's not a big experiential execution, just a really great out of home campaign. Out of home is such a creative medium in terms of the ability to express creativity and engagement, make somebody laugh with clever headlines and
Yeah.
visuals. It's just such a delightful medium in that regard, and I think we are going to see a swing back to just great creative expression based maybe more on empathy, not empathy, but based psychologically versus just data points,
Okay.
that online data can deliver. They can tell you a little bit about who is your target audience, but not necessarily why they should be interested in your brand, why they should feel a connection, have an affinity for your brand, and ultimately make a purchase decision. So I think we're going to see a return to some great. We're already seeing it now in terms of some campaigns that are coming in, and the creative is just really impressive. And I'm glad to see that happening, and I hope it happens more, because both benefit. Creative people benefit when they understand media, and media benefits when they understand creative. It was a great way to come up in the business. I'm forever grateful that I came up through a full service agency that gave me that full perspective on
Yeah.
what makes great advertising.
Yeah. Awesome. Listen, I thank you so much,
No
spending a
problem.
little bit of time with us, just chatting about stuff. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more stuff happening in the next little
Hmm.
while as we get out and spring is coming, and
Yeah.
let's get out there and see some ads, see some campaigns coming through. And again, thank you so much. We'll
Thank
chat
you.
again
Great.
soon.
Have a great day. All right. Bye
Cheers.
bye, Chris.
Bye.
Thanks.